Hi, this is Jacob Hornberger with Sheldon Richmond, and this is the Libertarian Angle, our weekly internet show to bring you the libertarian stance on various issues of the day. We've got a couple issues we're going to talk to you about today, and they're particularly issues that you're very unlikely to get the Libertarian Angle in the mainstream press. One of them involves a fascinating dispute over in Texas on that happened in the public school system, and it really gives you a good sense of how conservatives react to foreign policy issues, national security state, the war on terrorism, but really not just conservatives, but liberals react the same way. The dispute revolves around conservatives, but Fox News carried this news story about a test that was given to grade school students regarding 9/11. And the test asked about, well, why did 9/11 happen? And there were four options. One was the terrorists hate America. B, the recommended answer from the video the kids had watched was that the U.S. has done things to people overseas that have caused them to respond in this way. And then C was something like everyone hates America, and D was none of the above. Well, the recommended answer, like I said, was B from this video. This woman and this parent in Texas just went ballistic. She contacts the school board, and they contact the producers of the video, who profusely apologize and announce that they're going to delete the question and answer from the test. And then Fox News picks this up with, Megyn Kelly and the parent, and then some GOP state legislator. They're outraged. Absolutely outraged that anyone would, suggest that the U.S. government was involved in this thing. And this thing has lessons on all levels, especially, how different libertarians approach this thing. For one thing, they conflate the U.S. government with the American people. I mean, it's like one great big happy family where they see the government as the big brother or people's daddy, and under this paternalistic welfare state. We libertarians say, hey, the government is different from the people. I mean, the Bill of Rights protects people from the federal government. And unlike them, we're not afraid to examine U.S. foreign policy. We're not afraid to say, this is the bad things that the U.S. government has done to people overseas that has caused them to react in this way with anger and rage. And that really what we need to do is examine into whether these things are justifiable, whether the U.S. government should be doing this. This is the role of the citizen. To take a stand when his government's in the wrong, to examine it critically. And what a shame that the students are over there just being taught this regimented, one mindset way of thinking. What do you think, Sheldon?
Well, as we've seen in cases before this, you're not supposed to say that the U.S. policy in any way provoked those attacks or other attacks that have occurred, even though it is in the 9/11 Commission report, and it's been in at least one Pentagon study that the motive of the attackers was, attempting to get even or retaliate for intervention in a variety of ways in the Middle East, which of course doesn't mean it was a justifiable thing for them to do. But if you're going to understand what happened, you also want to understand the motives, even if what people did with those motives was very bad. So it's really odd that you're not supposed to say this. You're not supposed to tell students this, but there are some official bodies that have said the same thing. In 2008, when Ron Paul mentioned this during one of the presidential debates, Republican debates, Rudy Giuliani, of course, went ballistic and demanded it to be taken back. And Ron Paul, admirably recommended that he read several books, and I think sent him a stack of books, which I doubt that Giuliani ever read. So it's really bizarre that we have this sort of double focus. And as far as the public's concerned, you can never utter this. But in some official circles, it is acknowledged. Pretty bizarre.
Yeah, I think it's this mindset that exalts the U.S. national security state to almost like a god or an idol, where you're not supposed to question it. It's considered heresy. And if people take that position, then if your government's on the right track, obviously then it's impossible to get the government back on the right track. And that to me is the whole idea of patriotism. I mean, the genuine type of patriotism is the citizen that says, I'm going to take a critical look at what my government's doing, and if it's doing something wrong, I'm going to take a stand against it. And this is why I consider the White Rose group in Germany to be so heroic, because they were willing to do that. In the midst of war, they were telling Germans, don't support the troops because the government's in the wrong on this type of thing. And I think that's one of the distinguishing characteristics of libertarians. But, you know, I'd like to take this to a higher level, though, Sheldon. I mean, you've written this great book for us called Separating School and State. And I think that's another fascinating aspect to this dispute, because notice that the whole dispute is revolving around what these kids should be taught. You know, what's the official version? And the state legislator, the GOP guy, I mean, he really said it all when in the video, and people can Google the video, you know, by looking Fox News 9/11 controversy or something like that. And Megyn Kelly, she's the host. But the GOP guy says, well, we just, we have a Department of Education here in the state that had really good control over the textbooks and the curriculum. But, boy, this online learning has really just thrown a monkey wrench into this whole thing. We don't have as much control anymore. I mean, notice what he's doing. He's exalting the fact that the state is able to fix this mindset of regimentation and conformity among the students. That's something totally different from what you were writing about in your book that we libertarians propose, right?
Well, right. And one of the things I try to point out there, and others have pointed out, one reason governments always want to control education is not simply to make sure kids, learn how to read and write. Because they could do that. I mean, if the government wanted to make sure, if that's all their objective was, they could simply finance parents who couldn't send their kids to private school. If it were only that narrow objective, they want much more than that. They want to control the curriculum, and because that enables them to control social studies and history and how those things are taught. And inevitably, it's going to be done in a way that instills this attitude toward government that not just government in general, but the government they live under is benevolent, has tended to do good, over time, and deserves their loyalty, allegiance, and reverence. So it's exactly what you're saying, and that's why when something like this happens, and the government's conduct is brought into judgment, some people will get very upset by that and want to crack down and make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen. And that's what we're seeing in Texas.
Yeah, we libertarians, we generally don't get involved with these kind of disputes as to how to run the schools and what should be taught and what textbooks should be used. I mean, we take it to a whole different level. We say that the government shouldn't be involved in education any more than it's involved in religion. We want a total separation of school and state, as you titled your book. Would you talk a little bit? I mean, this is a shocking notion for people, because they've grown up in public schools. I mean, I have absolutely no doubts that Megyn Kelly and that parent in Texas and the GOP guy, that they're all products probably of public schools, but at least the state-approved educational system, because oftentimes licensed schools aren't any different because they're afraid of losing their license from the state if they teach the wrong thing. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your book proposed in terms of the libertarian solution to the educational morass? I mean, let's keep in mind that not even the president sends his children into a public school. Would you tell us a little bit about how the libertarians would handle education?
Well, you can sum it up in two words, which we apply to, almost everything. Free competition. Generally, people believe that competition is good and monopoly is not good, and they have good reasons for thinking that. With a monopoly, you expect too expensive services at too much higher cost than they need to be, and inferior services, because competition, as everybody has intuits, prompts people to do better because you have to win over customers. Well, schools, certainly the government schools, don't face those kinds of incentives, or they're in extremely weak form. It's true that parents can homeschool most places, or can send their kids to private school. But that's a much weaker incentive than the kind of thing I'm talking about, because since the public schools, government schools appear free, in other words, you're already paying taxes whether you use them or not, so there's no additional cost, there's no marginal cost if you send your child to the local government school. That's kind of unfair competition. If a private company were able to do something similar to that, everybody would be screaming unfair competition or predatory pricing. But the government does it every day, and it puts private alternatives to the government schools at a disadvantage, which is why we talk about government schools as being virtual monopolies. They're not absolute monopolies, but they're close to that, and you get the same results you would expect. Costing lots of money with an inferior product. So what we simply say is get the government out of it. Let competition be, let schooling be, and education in general, because it may not be traditional schooling, let that be open to the free market, and let the full power of entrepreneurship go to work on discovering the best ways of educating kids. And it may well not be in the traditional classroom. We can't make a prediction. We don't know. The internet I'm sure will play a big role in it, because it makes so many things, it brings so many things right to your fingertips that are otherwise very far away. But we need to have this open-ended, rivalrous, vigorous, entrepreneurial, competitive system, which would be open-ended. I don't even like the word system, because system sounds closed. It's an open-ended environment. And just get the government out of it. Let it just, as a transition, I would say, give the existing schools to the teachers and the administrators in those schools. Say, here, this is yours. You're not getting any tax money. Do what you want with it. Run it as a school if you want. Sell it off. It's yours. Just to get it out of the hands of the state. And that's what I would do.
Yeah,
and then remove all licensing and all of the other requirements that prevent private competitors from going into the education business.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that, we all see that the free market produces the best of everything, and socialism or socialist apparatuses produce the worst of everything. And really, this is what the government school system is. It's centrally planned, whether it's at a state level, local level, national level. Government's approving the curriculum, as that GOP senator in the video points out. And with the free market, I mean, you have all this diversity. Parents are in control of the education of their children. And I think most important is what you pointed out in your book is that you don't have this mindset of conformity and regimentation that's being inculcated in people. And people have choices. If they want to send their kids to a school that doesn't teach critical thinking, fine. But for the parents to say, look, I'm not afraid to have my child think about U.S. foreign policy. I'm not afraid to have them examine this. Then that parent will have choices too. One of the most fascinating things in the videotape that I saw was the reaction of the boy, the fifth grader that reported this to his mother. I mean, he immediately says, Mom, the only reason I answered that was because I knew what the guy wanted from the video, and I wanted to get 100 on the test. But I guarantee you that next time that kid answers that question, he's going to answer it the way he's supposed to. And I think 20 years from now, when he's presented with this, he's probably going to take the same position his mother did. He's never going to realize where this indoctrination came in. I mean, the best indoctrinated person, Sheldon, is the person that doesn't know he's been indoctrinated.
Yeah, well, that's true. Of course, your point about just answering what gets you the passing grade on the test is, of course, the way they teach you anyway. It's right. You're taught to the test, and students quickly learn that the way to get through school is to regurgitate whatever it is without even thinking about it very much. So that's another commentary on the method that the state schools use.
Yeah, and I think, another fascinating aspect of this thing is how the last person they're going to have on these shows is a libertarian. I mean, we operate outside their little paradigm. When you see this show on Fox News, I mean, you have the parent, the GOP guy, Megyn Kelly. They're all saying the same thing. And you see a lot of the conservative sites saying the same thing. Oh, this is outrageous that they're blaming us. And notice how when they blame us, they're conflating the U.S. government with the American people. They cannot separate out that we're dealing with two separate and distinct entities. And of course, the libertarian angle would be something that makes them very uncomfortable, because we're over here saying, hey, let's take a look at what the U.S. government's doing overseas. I mean, a good example of this, Sheldon, is Iran, where, people say, oh, well, look, they took all these diplomats hostage in the 1979 revolution. Oh, they just hate America and so forth. Well, you and I and other libertarians say, hey, wait a minute. Let's go back to some 25 years before 1953, when the U.S. government went in there and ousted their democratically elected prime minister and installed a brutal dictator known as the Shah of Iran, trained his forces on how to torture people, and then helped him oppress the Iranians for the next 25 years. That's something that the statists just can't do, Sheldon.
No, history always began, the day of whatever the crisis is. And you're never supposed to go back. In fact, after the embassy was taken in Tehran in 1979, and someone did raise, I think, in a press conference with Carter, President Carter at the time, did this have something to do with the 1953 coup? His answer was that that's ancient history, and that's the attitude. Because we never, if the United States or an American or anything to do with the United States is ever the target of anything, you're just not supposed to inquire whether that was motivated by some wrong committed by the U.S. government. Again, it doesn't necessarily excuse what was done, but you would think that intelligent people want to understand situations and see how they can prevent them from happening. So inquiring into motive is a perfectly legitimate thing, even if it has nothing to do with excusing the perpetrator. But that was just dismissed as ancient history. And that's the attitude. We don't need to know. We don't need to know. All we know is we were attacked, and now we go from there.
Yeah, that's a great point about motive, because they always use it to say, oh, we can't examine motive because that's justifying what they're doing. That's defending what they're doing. That's so ridiculous. I mean, prosecutors that are prosecuting criminal cases, they examine the motive all the time. Does that mean they're defending the guy that they're prosecuting for murder? Yeah, of course not. It's ridiculous. They're simply saying this is what motivated the guy, and it's an important examination with respect to foreign policy because, hey, if the government's doing something wrong, then it's up to the citizen that's motivating people here with anger and rage. Then it's up to us, the citizenry, to put the government on the right track. And that's what's different about us libertarians, is that we're willing to make that examination. This is what staters are not willing to do. They're especially in foreign affairs. It's like the national security state is everything. I'm not going to question whatever it does. They're the experts. And, the consequence of that is if your government is on the wrong track, then you never get it back on the right track. Hey, let me move to another subject that I know you're writing an op-ed on this week. This idea of the I mean, it's laughable. The $1 trillion coin that, of course, was proposed a few months ago, and this whole concept of the Federal Reserve and money is now back into the news. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to be writing about in your op-ed.
Well, I was watching an MSNBC program Saturday morning with Chris Hayes, the show called Up with Chris Hayes, and he reran a segment from a few months ago about the $1 trillion platinum coin. That idea, I guess, is fairly dead. You don't hear it discussed so much. But what grabbed my attention in his introducing the segment, which included a panel of discussion over whether this is a good idea, was his view of money. Now, just a quick background. The idea of the platinum coin, there's a provision in the law that lets the federal government, lets the Treasury mint sort of commemorative coins, platinum coins. They're limited on how much money they can print. There are some statutory limitations on that. So it can't just on its own start printing up money. But someone said, you know what it can do though? It can print a platinum coin. It can mint a platinum coin. And so somebody actually seriously proposed that in order to get if the Republicans don't raise the debt limit, which will be coming up again, I think, or maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's been settled now for a while. But anyway, it was coming up when this discussion first arose. The idea was, well, if the Republicans want to put too many tough conditions on raising the debt limit, Obama could get around it by simply minting the platinum coin, a $1 trillion face value coin. Okay, we just stamp on there $1 trillion, and then sell it to the Fed. The Fed would then credit the Treasury's account at the Fed with $1 trillion, and then that would be better than raising the debt limit because they wouldn't have to borrow the money then. They'd have $1 trillion to spend. And of course, the Fed would have an asset, an alleged asset, of a coin with a face value of $1 trillion. It wouldn't be really $1 trillion worth of platinum, because that would be like hundreds of tons of platinum. Platinum's like $1,600 an ounce or something, or a little bit under that. So it would only have a bit of platinum in it. So the real value wouldn't be anything like $1 trillion. It would be maybe half an ounce. So that's maybe at $800. But it would be on the books at $1 trillion for the Fed. So what amazed me about this was not so much the idea, which, like I said, is pretty much gone. Everybody realized it was a gimmick and it wasn't going to happen. But when Hayes introduced it, he said, look, let's face it. The government creates money out of thin air. Okay, which is true. The government just can make computer entries, right, and create money. When the Fed, when I say government here, I mean the Fed. When the Fed, which is a government entity, when the Fed buys a bond from a bank, it doesn't give gold, let's say, to the bank in payment, or even paper money in payment. It simply makes a change in that bank's Fed account, right, on its computerized ledger, saying it now has whatever the price of that bond was. So it's true. Money is created out of thin air, but Hayes went on to say the following. He said, what makes money value is simply social convention, a norm. And then later he said, it's a shared illusion. And finally he wrapped up his little introduction by saying, it's a kind of magic. But is it good magic or bad magic? And of course he left that to the panel to discuss. Well, I wanted to go after this idea that money, the value of money is a social convention. Now, it's certainly true that what we use as money arises, I mean, this is a long story that the Austrians have told, Menger and Mises told, about how money evolves. And so if gold naturally evolves, or some other metal evolves as the thing that's most tradable, and then it becomes a medium of exchange, you could say that's the result of a social convention, but not in the sense that we all sat down and agreed. It's a spontaneous order. It grows naturally. But what's not a social convention is the value of the money. So there's a difference between what becomes the money and what the value of, say, the unit is. That's not social convention. That's supply and demand. So Hayes seemed to have no conception that if the government were to just put $1 trillion into people's hands, let's say it was like the old helicopter effect that they talk about in the textbooks, right? They go up. Bernanke goes up in a helicopter with a $1 trillion $1 bills and then evenly spreads them, and everybody ends up with more money in their wallet. Prices would go up at some point eventually, start to be bid up because people had more money, and at some point, prices would be somewhat higher because of this additional money. That's not the result of social convention. That's the result of supply and demand. It's the old story of, too many dollars chasing too few goods. Because when you create money, you're not creating real wealth. Creating money is not the same as creating real wealth. Hayes and Keynesians and a lot of other people seem to think that creating money does create wealth. And I try to explain in this op-ed that this law of supply and demand is not a matter of convention. It's rooted in the logic of choice and human action. And it's not convention that if the supply of something goes up relative to demand, other things being equal, price falls. And if the supply of something drops relative to demand, other things being equal, price increases. That's the law of supply and demand. And that is not convention, because you can't imagine a society in which the reverse were true, right? Where if the supply fell, price dropped. Or if the supply increases, the price rose. I mean, you can't imagine a society in which that happens. So people live by superstition. Progressives like to claim they're pro-science. They like to attack people who disagree with them as being anti-science. And here they are embracing a magical theory of money. I thought it was very funny.
Yeah, and I just find it fascinating that they really see this method as a way to increase people's standard of living, and when really all it does is it pumps up these bubbles and then they burst, and each time the bubble gets worse and worse. That's one of the things that really attracted me to the Austrian school, Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich Hayek, was that they talked in terms of savings, people's savings in the private sector is providing this capital base that makes people more productive, and that's what increases wage rates over time. That without this idea of more productivity, it's impossible to have a society whose standard of living is rising. I mean, we see that in Zimbabwe, where they they printed money out the gazoo, expanded, the artificial expansion of money. And I mean, they're more impoverished than ever. And it's just amazing to me that this notion that you can make people wealthy by having government do these kind of shenanigans is still so prevalent, when it seems to me so obvious that the way you increase standard of living is through private capital savings and accumulation.
Well, that's right. I mean, money is not wealth. Access to goods is wealth, and creating, just printing money or creating computerized money obviously doesn't bring real things into existence. I mean, I have somewhere in my office here, I have a banknote from the Zimbabwe Central Bank for $100 trillion. Set it up there somewhere. And it says on there, and it's signed by the president of the Zimbabwe Central Bank, it promises that if I bring this to the bank, he will give me, guess what, 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. But I don't know, and I already have it in one note. Is he going to give me like singles? That would be a bit of a cost to manage that. So what good does that do me? Or if you're stranded on an island somewhere and you're signaling for help, and a plane overhead drops a box down, parachuting down, and you say, oh, great, provisions, and you open it up, and there's gold bars or there's Federal Reserve notes in it, you're not going to be celebrating. It will do you zero good. What you want are goods and services. And printing money does not create goods and services. All it does when you print money is transfer purchasing power from the people, in other words, just us, the regular people, to the government or special interests. And that's different. That's a form of theft. That's a subtle, indirect form of theft, because you're transferring purchasing power by watering down each monetary unit from, everybody else to special interests. And that's, if you speak about it that way, it doesn't really sound very good, does it?
No, it's the age-old way to plunder and loot people, especially people at the bottom of the economic ladder, the people on fixed incomes. And another thing that really attracted me to the Austrians was this notion that the price system, which of course depends on sound money, is a messaging system. It's communicating to people intricate things about the market with respect to supply and demand. And what they do by inflating the currency is they alter this messaging system, this really intricate system where people look at prices and say, okay, I should produce less of that or more of that, or I consume more or consume less. The inflation, the destruction of that price system is so manifest. And I think that's one of the great contributions of the Austrian school.
No, that's right. And one of the things that really drove home, picking up from previous thinkers, was that it doesn't, the money doesn't evenly come into the economy and therefore, gently raise all prices. If we all woke up tomorrow morning with double the amount of money in our wallets and our bank accounts, then we all went out and started, saying, wow, I got more money. We all went out and started buying additional things. At some point, prices would go up generally and, more or less double, let's say. There's not a precise monetary relationship or a quantitative relationship. But in fact, that's not how inflation happens. It's not some even distribution of money. The government injects it at particular points. This is known as the Cantillon effect, after the thinker who first wrote about it. It's injected at various points. The government or the Fed uses the new money in particular ways, which means particular people receive it first, others receive it later. So the first recipients of it get the benefit because prices haven't risen yet. The later recipients, it's like a chain letter. The later recipients, by the time they get the new money, the prices already have gone up. So they're facing, and people on fixed incomes and whatnot, really get hurt because the prices have gone up and they don't have more money. So It's a form of class. You can apply class analysis to this. It's not some benign, even thing that sort of just changes numbers nominally. It makes real changes in the economy.
Yeah, I think our American ancestors had it right in a second best fashion when they made gold and silver coins legal tender under the Constitution. People think, paper money was the standard backed by gold. that they think that's what the gold standard was. That's nonsense. The gold standard was that people used gold and silver coins because they didn't trust paper money, and there was no Federal Reserve to plunder and loot people. And I think the best, though, choice is the one that we in the libertarian Austrian world call for, and that's the denationalization of money, a separation of money in the state. Let the free market determine the best medium of exchange, and that's a libertarian angle on monetary affairs. And that's the end of the show. Unfortunately, Sheldon, our time is up, and enjoyed another week here with you, and look forward to talking to you next week.